Hello, everybody. We are at number 17 of the greatest checkmates in all the history. Out of 30, I've been going through the list. Now we're on number 17. And boy, do I have an exciting one for you today. Now, there have been some people that have been messaging me and saying things like, well, maybe it's because everybody's scared for Halloween. They think there's things behind me, maybe a ghost or something like that, or somebody walking around. Are you sure? I mean, haven't looked through all the videos, but I haven't seen anything. Are you sure it's not Alan you're thinking of, my 2-year-old son? Sometimes he walks around with a mask, and I know people say, yeah, but he's not this somebody really tall walking around behind you. But I mean, when Alan gets standing on furniture, he can look tall also. So I think everybody just has the jitters. So let's go on to number 17 on the list of the greatest checkmates of all time. Now, before there was a world champion, there were still people who were considered best in the world. And one person who was definitely considered best in the world was Paul Morphy. Paul Morphy was around playing, I think, 1850s, 1860s. Very powerful. Back in a time long before computers or long before internet, long before almost anything, he was considered the best. And he was a great tactician, and he played in what they called the romantic style back then, a very aggressive style. And it was quite a sight to see some of his games. This game is a game that many people consider the greatest game of all time. I don't quite consider it that high. I'll explain why later, but it is 17 on my list, and it's quite a game. So let's get to the game. Now, Paul Morphy was challenged by, I believe, this Duke in Paris. Well, sort of. He invited him to an opera. And remember, this was Paris. That's Paris. Well, actually, it was before the Eiffel Tower, so it might have been more like this. Paris back in the 1850s. And so when Morphy accepted the challenge, he knew that what was really happening is he was kind of being challenged to a match. So he went to this opera in Paris, and Morphy played with his back to the opera. Now let's get to the game. So he was white here, and he started playing the Duke. And before long, he realized he was actually playing three people. The Duke had other people with him speaking in different languages, helping him with the game. And remember, this wasn't like an official rated game. They were just kind of playing, I guess, for fun. But the Duke was one of the top in the world at the time, or at least a very, very strong player. And of course, Morphy was known as the greatest in the world. And it was kind of unfair, you could say, 3 against 1. So this is the Philidor defense, pawn to d6. Some people think it's kind of passive, but it's really not a bad move. More common might be, instead of the Philidor, knight c6. You could do that. Definitely don't play something like this. Do not bring the queen out early. You want to develop minor pieces. And in a way, when you're playing d6, you're allowing for this bishop to come out, minor piece. White played the best move, pawn to d4. What do you think is a good move here? Go ahead and pause the video if you need to think about it. Okay, if you said pawn takes pawn, you're correct. I think that's the best move, or one of the top 2 or 3 moves in this position. Now, what happened, though, is back in these days, bishop g4 was a very common move. It's not considered very good anymore. But that's what was played by the Duke. Morphy took. And you do not want to take back, otherwise queen takes queen, king takes, and knight takes. Now you're threatening this pawn and the bishop, so you definitely don't want to let that happen. So what actually happened in the game was, after pawn takes e5, bishop takes, queen takes. You could take and double your pawns, but remember I say usually you want to avoid doubling pawns because the bottom pawn cannot move. Pawn takes back. A great move for Morphy here, bishop c4. Now, I know a lot of you are saying, wait a minute, Mr. Dean, isn't white threatening the scholar's mate? Well, yes, kind of, but remember, he brought his queen out to take something. So it wasn't like he just moved it out. It was to take something back. And bishop c4, adding pressure is a pretty natural move here. So after that, knight f6. This isn't considered very good. And Morphy played a great queen move here that threatens two things at once. Let's see if you can find it. A white queen move that threatens two things at once. Pause the video. Okay, if you said queen to b3, you were correct. Threatening this pawn and f7. And you really can't defend both of these. You can't defend this and this. His opponent played queen e7, which was pretty good. Probably expecting Morphy to take. This might be a good move here, checking. Trading queens. That might be the best, but I think white would still be winning. But not what happened. Morphy did not try to win the pawn. He played knight c3. Interesting move, maybe not the best. His opponent played c6. His queen's guarding this. And then Morphy, bishop g5, pinning the knight. Remember, a pin is when you paralyze a piece, so it doesn't want to move or maybe can't move. Then pawn b5. Another move that's not really considered the best, but I can understand black's just trying to get aggressive, push away some of white's pieces. But now Morphy takes. Look at that sacrifice. Now, that's not that big of a sacrifice because you're going to win two pawns. Bishop takes, and you just lost a 3-point piece. Plus, you get an open king even more. So knight comes here. And what do you guys think is a good move for white? We're actually almost at the end of this game. But what do you think is a good move for white to keep the pressure on? Pause the video if you need to. Okay, if you said bishop takes, I would say you're releasing the pressure a little too much. They could take with the queen. So I wouldn't do that yet. I would do something to add to the pressure. So one way to add is to develop and pressure that at the same time. Now that looks really good. Now you're threatening to take this knight, and they won't be able to really take back with the queen because of the rook, and they can't take back with the other knight because of the bishop threatening the queen. So after castle, rook d8, I guess what else can black do? And look at this move. Rook takes, another sacrifice. Rook takes back. Pressure is on. Look at that pressure. What can we do to add the pressure? It's not the best move to take yet. How can we add the pressure? Pause the video. All right. I hope you said rook d1. That is correct. Adding pressure, rook t1. Now, not much black can do except try to develop. Notice how he hasn't developed his bishop over here. He hasn't developed his rook. And it's going to take him a while to. He moves his queen out to try to get some development. After that, bishop takes. Knight takes. And by the way, did I say they were at the opera? I think I did. And that's why this game is known as the opera game, which we talked about in number 20-something, one of those matches. So can you see the move with that hint? This is an opera-type checkmate, and it's the original opera checkmate. Do you see the move? Pause the video. Okay. If you said queen takes queen, no, no, no. You don't want to trade right now. And you're not even ahead in points, I don't think. So you don't want to trade. But if you said queen check, yes. Queen b8 check. They can't move their king up. The only response they have is to take. And what is the checkmate? Rook to d8. What a fabulous game. This is known as the opera game, Paul Morphy. So really an interesting game. I liked it quite a bit. Now there were, to be fair, there were a lot of moves in there that you might look at and go, what? Like, why would you do that? Play a move like that? But Morphy, was playing in another time. There weren't computers around. It was the 1850s. If you took Morphe and put him in today's time, it'd probably be pretty awesome too. But he definitely played very well, and he would have been world champion at the time had they had a world championship. And I'm sure if he did have a world championship, he definitely would have been pretty happy about that for sure. So the reason I don't put this as like higher is that I think I love this game, but there's some games you'll see that I love even more coming up. There's some games that I just can relate to a little more. But anyway, quite a good game, the very famous and original opera game. We will see you guys soon, and I don't see anything behind me, nothing at all. So I think I'm pretty safe here. See you next time.